We are Black Hills Information Security. This is John Malone. He is here to present today an introduction to physical security. Thank you all for showing up. This will be recorded. Slides are going to be available in the slides resources channel there in Discord. John, take it away, buddy.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you everybody for joining us today. This is my first webcast, so I do appreciate the turnout. So as Deb just mentioned, we are going to be talking a little bit about physical security today. However, I have a feeling this presentation might be a bit different. Reason for that being my background happens to be in contract security. So I used to work for a third party, or a security firm rather, which would send me out to third parties and put me in charge of their physical security programs. So some of the things that I talk about today are going to be spoken about from that perspective, but we'll get more into that later. Without further ado, just a little bit of information about myself. My first job out of college actually was at a security firm. It's the security firm Securitas. I think they have the majority of the security market share in the United States, and I started there as a human resources employee, particularly in charge of interviewing and hiring security officers. One thing led to another, and I took a position with one of their competitors, Allied Universal, and I worked there as both a security officer and as an account manager. Due to my time there and at Securitas, I was required to become licensed as a state security officer, and I am now here at Black Hills Security, where I work as a penetration tester. Just some quick notable certifications that I've got. I have a 20-hour training license that is what I had to take to work as a security guard. I also have the certification management of aggressive behaviors, and I'm certified in CPR, first aid, and AED, and I'm also a certified junior pen tester. So on-site security teams, people typically think of security and they'll think of either one of two things. It's typically either something like, loss prevention, or, maybe some guy who stands outside and lets people in, to a building. But the truth is that companies that choose not to cover security themselves often turn to outside parties to do so. I'm going to go into a little bit more about what those companies are later, but they're typically, whether they're internal or external teams, a security team is there to secure people, property, and information. And also this kind of differs depending on industry, but you might see security operations which are around the clock, while there might be other ones that are only within standard business hours. Security teams are typically located on site, but remote monitoring is, especially commonplace, especially when you get into things like SOC and whatnot. But yeah, there's a whole lot of reasons why people have security teams. First and foremost, asset protection. You got to keep your stuff safe. But also there's also reasons to do it for insurance, also your public perception, and also, of course, threat mitigation, especially if the operation is in a more dangerous or high-risk injury or high-risk industry. Apologies. So just a few quick examples on internal security teams that you'll typically see. Like I mentioned earlier, loss prevention teams in retail tends to be kind of, the leading thing that a lot of people think about. There might be someone that, take Costco, for example. I don't know how many of you shop there or not, but you've always got that guy who stands by the door on your way out who's going to check your receipt, look in your cart. That's basic loss prevention. And then, of course, in other buildings, like you'll see this if you go to like downtown Chicago a lot and hit up some of the high rises, there's always going to be that front desk where you check in and get a badge. Or you might have just a guy who's, manning a bar or a local nightclub as a bouncer. Or you might have a security operations center, like I mentioned earlier. So now I'm going to get into the weeds a little bit, because this is really my comfort zone, external and contract teams. So 4 companies in the United States are particularly well known for providing contract security services. Those are Securitas, Allied Universal, G4S, and Titan Security. These companies have tons of clients. I'm not kidding when I say as much as a third of the market for downtown buildings might be covered by a single provider, if not more. And again, some portfolios are national. when I was at Allied Universal, I worked for a Fortune 500 national operation where we had multiple sites that were all for the same client. Security officers. Now these firms, they employ security officers. So the security officer doesn't actually work for the client. They work for their company, which is, one of these ones up here, or another firm if it's a smaller organization. So one thing that you do tend to see is overlap in what these officers are trained in. That tends to be things regarding laws and company policy regarding the use of force, first aid, CPR, different types of report writing, post-specific training, which again can, change depending on what industry you're working in, and possibly weapons training and certifications. Officers often take exams, as a part of becoming licensed, and depending on whether or not you are going to be working as armed or unarmed, you can expect a difference in the amount of required training hours. So some of the duties of an on-site security officer, when you actually see these guys at post, a lot of what they do throughout the day is simply observing and reporting. As far as report writing goes, there tends to be two different types of reports that you tend to see when you actually look at security logs. The first of which is a daily activity report or a daily activity log, and the second being incident reports. Daily activity reports tend to be either an hour by hour or bi-hourly report. Again, it really depends on the type of site that the officer is working at, but this serves as a first-hand written report that serves as a way of documenting everything that is happening at the location. So for example, if an officer checks in 5 people and gives them badges, he or she would write that down in the daily activity report. On a more serious end, you have incident reports, and that's typically if there's something like a fire or medical or a criminal report that's issued on site. So if there's a fire in, say, like a boiler room, that would likely be an incident report, and it may be signed by one or more parties. Record keeping is also a huge part of what officers do. They look at things like access control logs. So again, that's for things like who's been let into the building and what keys and badges are currently signed out, etc. They also do a lot of report logging as well. So that tends to be more nuanced. Like if there's a certain type of security report system that's in use on like the internal network, or if it's like manning a shipping yard and you're looking at trucks come in, you're signing trucks in and out. Internal security teams often make use of different camera systems. The one that I'm most particular to is called Genetech. We had one that covered, I want to say the majority of all of our sites in the country, where any officer, regardless of their position within that organization, would be able to see different locations. Excuse me. Another part of being observant is physical presence. Physical presence is often used as a crime deterrent. And this is something that you can ask anyone who's ever been on a physical test. You're less likely to try and gain entry if there's an officer present. Same as such, criminals are less likely to do things if there is a officer on standby. Physical presence for an officer often involves doing things like maintaining a uniform to help them convey a sense of authority, completing regular patrols, which may or may not be at random intervals, demonstrating attentiveness, and also demonstrating strong body language to really emphasize their presence as an authority figure. Officers may also be charged with physical enforcement. So naturally, that might mean subduing a suspect or perpetrator through different levels of force. Officers may also do audits. And again, this kind of goes back to the whole report writing thing. You may see someone have a checklist while they walk around and audit a site. They may keep logs regarding keys and badges, etc.
Hey, John.
So, hey, I see CJ's here. What's up, CJ?
Good training from the pre-show banter. What's the size and kind of profile? And I know this is kind of a broad question, but when do you start seeing physical security groups? I know like banks is an obvious answer, right?
Yeah.
But what are some industries, I guess, and what's the size where you start seeing physical security groups?
So like you said, banks is a big one. Here in Chicago, especially now that, marijuana has been legalized for recreational use, you've got these dispensaries that are popping up. You'll often see armed guards at locations like that as well. You'll see it a lot in airports. I'm sure everyone here is familiar with airport security and just how wonderful that is. Also, you'll see it a lot in manufacturing areas too. And that really depends on, again, who the client is. But for example, my time in security, I worked for a food defense program. Now, you hear the word food defense, you might think of some fat kid hugging a cookie jar close to his chest or something, but food defense is about preserving the integrity of food. And it's something that's actually taken rather seriously because food preparation facilities are a major target for terrorists.
Sure.
And again, it's something you really don't hear about or you think about, but like when you go to the grocery store, do you really think about what's in that frozen pizza you're picking out of the fridge? Of course you don't. You take it home, you throw it in the oven and you eat it, right? But if a threat actor ever gained access to that facility and was able to introduce some sort of, physical agent, such as powdered glass or some sort of chemical to that, to that food prep, you're going to have a lot of people in a lot of trouble real quick. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. So I came out of the defense industry, right? And we had the skiffs. And so that stuff was all heavily mandatory. I know the defense industry, because I'm thinking of people that we've done physical security tests against. They tend to be financials, right? Bigger financial groups, not like small 20, 40 person, but yeah, it's just kind of, because I'm thinking about when we do physical security, often we're not going, certainly not against the commercial teams, but we have done that, like big law firms. I think of our favorite people in Chicago. They've got like an amazing, because they're defending a skyscraper. So they've got this nice place with the person gates or whatever trying to get in. So that's
sure.
Tough. Yeah. All right. Cool. Carry on.
Cool. So when you interact with security officers and you kind of look at what sort of training they receive, it tends to overlap regardless of who they work for. A lot of that training involves interacting with the public because, your officers have to be able to interact with the public in a way that's safe, courteous, etc. Because honestly, who wants to be sued for like a wrongful use of force, Fire safety and emergency preparedness is another huge area of training, as is first aid. Officers also tend to receive very strict training on following their chain of command. So if a superior calls you, you are to follow your orders. It is not uncommon to see security companies that have language in their employee handbooks where simply being insubordinate can be an immediately terminable offense. And again, that's something that's really good to keep in mind, especially if you're working on crafting some sort of social engineering plan for a test. Officers will also be trained on their site-specific post orders. So again, like CJ and I were just kind of talking about, you've got all sorts of different industries which employ these people. And each one of those industries is going to have, unique post orders. So for example, an officer who's working in a manufacturing area might be required to wear steel-toe boots at all times as part of their uniform post orders. And then again, you might see someone in a bank and, that suddenly that steel toe requirement might not be there. Interacting with first responders is another big one too. You can ask anyone who works as an unarmed officer that what their job is, and they'll probably tell you my job is to be a body and to observe and report and to be able to work with first responders. So if there's a criminal on the property and someone's loitering outside or someone's harassing people downstairs, unless your use of force policy gives you the freedom to do so, officers are typically encouraged to call the authorities first, unless, there's a serious risk of loss of life or grave bodily injury should you not take action. So now that we know a little bit about what officers are trained in, we've also got to pay attention to the things that they're not trained in. Now, I've been in the security industry for a while, and I'm a member of the Security Guards Reddit channel even, and it's always fun to see what people run into when they're at work, and also to read stories about what's happened to people while they're on post. One thing I've noticed, just from interacting with the security community, and even just from training programs I've taken in the past from all sorts of different providers, is that social engineering techniques and cybersecurity tend to take a back seat you don't see too much about that. And, I think that's a real shame because those are things that are really valid attack surfaces today. You look at basic red team tactics, social engineering is just such a huge part of that. And if you have guards on site who aren't trained in that, that's not good. But keep these things in mind because we're going to talk a little bit more about these concepts as we move on. So as part of my last position, I did my fair share of physical pen tests. And just me, again, this is just me saying this, but I tend to break every test down, especially if it's like social engineering or physical site visit, into 4 different steps. First and foremost, and the most importantly, do your recon. If you do not do your recon, you will not have a good plan. It's that simple. Because doing good recon is what's going to get you that good information, whether it's driving to the site and looking around, whether it's going on social media, company websites, whatever. You're going to want to do your recon before you get into your testing environment. And a good adversary is going to do the same. Once you've done your recon, you're going to want to weaponize that information that you've obtained. So, and I'll show this later on, like if you want to really scare the pants off of somebody, who might be working in a security capacity, or even just like, doesn't have to be necessarily a security team, but for example, punch a company's name into Google and start Googling around for payroll information or when employees are typically paid. In that case, you might be able to call somebody and say, oh, hey, your boss has been fired effective immediately. This is John Smith from ABC Company Human Resources. Your boss has been terminated and we no longer have access to their payroll. As such, I'm going to need to make sure that we collect some information so you're paid in a timely manner tomorrow. That puts fear into people, and that's information that you would only have if you took the time to do your recon. Next up, execute your plan. I know I'm already kind of talking about this stuff, but you've really got to take that information that you get and you've got to put it to good use. Information is good, but there's also a lot of good information that if you overlook it and you don't think to use it, you might miss an easy win. And step 4, my favorite, is obtaining your loot. If you've made it this far and you've got a good plan of action, chances are you're going to get a win somewhere. Could be spare papers found in a dumpster. It could be you tailgating into a building and finding an open conference room, etc.
Hey, John.
Yes.
So one of the big things is one thing on recon is you got to get really creative, right?
Oh, sure.
You're wanting to think outside the box, like leaving no stone unturned. So a lot of people, I think, they look at recon and they're like, you got to go through. Yes, I looked at them. I looked it on Google Maps. I looked up the company. But you can really get devious and add a lot of creativity just through the recon. But I also wanted to talk to you about. I'm not on camera, I realized. Click is delayed. So when you're dividing the loot, or figuring out what loot to get, talk through about how you work through that with the customer, kind of the goals and objectives and the interaction.
Yeah, so when you're in the discovery phase for your engagement, your customer's probably going to have some sort of interest on what you can obtain as a result of your test. It's really good to get that stuff down beforehand and to get it into writing and to look for advantages to obtain that while you're on site. I'll give you an example. Like I had a job I did some time ago where I had a customer who was concerned about, waste handling, right? So I went to that site, and you better believe the first thing I did was scope out those dumpsters. I took a look to see when people were throwing the trash out, who's going out there, and is the stuff bagged? Are they using black bags? Are they using see-through bags, etc.? And funny enough, on this very test, I saw an instance where we went into those garbage cans and there was unshredded paperwork in there that had termination notices and salary information.
Wow.
Yeah, not good. So, again, like if I didn't take the time to really lay out that groundwork with what the customer is looking for the test, that might have been a miss for me. Because honestly, who wants to crawl through garbage? Right.
Yeah. It's a dirty job, but somebody's got to do it.
Yeah. But in this case, working, with the customer during the discovery phase, that helped. And I think it's what helped us kind of get that win at the end of the day.
Here's a tip I like, because I have done it with social engineering, is I like to get their guard manual to know what the specific protocols are.
Mm-hmm.
And then those are like threads you kind of pull at, right? Because that's kind of their policy and outline. You're like, do they really comply with the things they're saying they're supposed to do? So it seems like a bit of a cheat. And some companies like to push back and say, well, it's like cheating if we give you our, the inside information. I'm like, yeah, but you only have us for this much time. And we like to be very effective and efficient and targeted on the things. So I think that's an interesting thing.
Yeah, and it's always good to do that, because the more information you have, that helps simulate an attack where it's a worst case situation,
Right.
Like what if one of your internal sources leaked information to a party and then they attacked you? What then?
Shift
absolutely.
turnover. Give me a map of your camera coverages and we'll see if there's a place that makes it easier, just to see if that can happen. You try the obvious ones, you try walking through the front gate, but then you also try to pick at the biggest weaknesses they have too. So carry on.
Thank you, CJ. So like CJ and I were just talking about, recon's super important, right? And of course, looking at things on Google, LinkedIn, social media and whatnot, that's important. You're going to want to get the basic company information and maybe some information about the people who work there. Like none of that's going to hurt. But really, you can take recon quite a few steps further. And that's why I think visiting the location and being discreet is so important. For example, when I'm downtown, I don't go down there much anymore, but in my last role, I would always look at buildings, while I'm walking between the locations that I managed. And I would notice that so many companies just have phone numbers posted on like the front door for their security teams. You see it everywhere. And those phone numbers are good because you might be able to call that and implement social engineering attacks to get information out of those people. Similarly, you've got things like loading dock and perimeter doors. Loading docks are always a great point of entry because, typically the people who go there aren't going to be people who are just off the street, and they're not always manned either. So that could serve as an easy way into a location. I used to joke with a few of my the officers that I worked with as well, thank God that we have someone posted down there, because otherwise someone, off the street could throw on a high visibility vest and probably just walk in and everyone would think they're a contractor. Thirdly, you're also going to want to look to see if what the windows look like at the building too. You've got a lot of fancy buildings where it's not uncommon to see like these huge glass windows and you've got people sitting near those. Sometimes it's worth seeing, like, if there's any sensitive information you can see from like, an opportunistic window. And then like CJ was saying, cameras are a thing, they're everywhere, but you're going to want to look for those anyway. And maybe even see if you can identify some blind spots or just where they're pointed. And you're not always going to be able to see like directly which way a camera is facing too. It really depends on the type of camera. Another good thing to look for is exposed network ports. That and their Wi-Fi security, because it's not uncommon to go into a lobby somewhere and see like a big sign that says, hey, here's our guest Wi-Fi password. And if you're able to plug into a network port, it might be a good idea to see if you can get an IP address, Let's see. Also, another really good thing to look for is people outside taking smoke breaks. People love to talk to each other while they're out there, and it's often a really good way to go over there and social engineer people, befriend them, and then, follow them back inside. They're usually not going to confront you. And also another thing, and this is a mistake that I made during one of my first engagements, is I decided to take a picture at an opportune time, and it resulted in me being caught. I personally find that taking pictures, or at least keeping picture taking to a minimum, is a pretty good idea. if the site has trained security officers, this is one of the things that they're trained to look for. And you'll see posts about this inside internal security offices all the time. Hey, someone outside taking pictures, call the security manager or confront them and ask them what they're doing. Because this is something that threat actors regularly do when they're scoping or casing a location. One thing that I prefer doing just to look a little less conspicuous is to actually carry a pen and paper with me and jot down crucial notes or draw diagrams for myself, because nobody's really going to care about some guy scribbling in a notepad.
Classic clipboard ruse.
Yep.
I'm curious though that with taking pictures, that seems like it should fall by the wayside, because if you really want to, another way to try to intrude on them is fly a drone in there.
Yeah.
Right. Then that way there's no person with a telephoto lens taking pictures of your building. That stands out. Drones are hard to detect.
Yeah.
Mapping and checking you. There's a question though that I want to get answered from Hilltop 6. He said, outside of red team operator or physical pen tester, what are some other relevant jobs, careers that bridges those skills in physical security operations with the technical IT knowledge and risk management? Can you think of other things?
Yes, I can. I know this is going to sound really typical, but my last job, physical security manager. When you're working in a security management position, there's an expectation that you're going to understand everything you need about, the physical side of things, such as hiring security officers, managing your workforce, etc. But there's also a lot of extra training that you take also. And cybersecurity is one of those things, that and, understanding of phishing awareness and all that sort of stuff. That's really all I've got, but I know that's both physical and cyber were a fairly big part of my last job.
Yeah. So Brian relayed a question about, do you think the use of drones, do you have any evidence the use of drones for recon is increasing?
I don't. I have no idea, in all honesty.
I would assume it has to be. Like,
I do know that there's at certain outdoor locations and officers I've spoken to who work at outdoor locations, like big outdoor venues, touristy areas, that keeping an eye out for drones is actually part of a standard patrol, and I have been seeing that more.
Man, but some of those things are hard to detect. I'd be interested in energy companies and like oil, because we've done with like the pipeline companies.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you do that aerial detect? Like, that's just an interesting topic for do a whole one on just drone security anyway. Cool.
So speaking of recon, and this is kind of an optional stop, I know we're talking about physical security primarily, but again, recon's important, so I figured I'd throw this in here anyway. Giving their IT help desk a call can always be a great resource, and it's because that the IT help desk can also give you a ton of information to look for. And that's information that you can get from, social engineering somebody or whatnot. But say, for example, you are testing an organization and you call their IT desk and you say, "Hi, I'm John Smith, and my email is jsmith@abccompany.com. The IT people probably will not reset your password. Instead, they're going to ask you for some sort of proof that you are who you say you are. A good way to get this information is to simply ask them what they need to reset your password. And when they tell you something, lie and tell them something like, "Oh, hey, I don't have that information right now," or "I'm not comfortable sharing it. What else can I give you?" And simply repeat this until you have a whole list of stuff that you can ask or look for. And then end your call. You can always call back later once you get that stuff and you can start hijacking accounts. So before we go further into the weeds, I do want to spend a quick moment talking about access control and hardening. Just some basic things. You've got doors and locks and keys, obviously. Badges, you've got those becoming increasingly prevalent. I think that's a staple in a lot of places now. Perimeter controls such as gates, garage doors, etc. Windows and walls, request for exit sensors, and also the security professional and staff. I know a lot of those things really basic and kind of duh on the surface, but it's always good to ask yourself, how can you attack these? Because there are a variety of ways. Some may be obvious, some may not be so obvious. So real quick, like for doors and locks, I've got a tool right here that I bought from it's a company called Red Team Tools. They've got a ton of really cool stuff. Shameless plug for those guys, I guess. But this is something called a gem, and it's something that you can use kind of like a traveler's hook if you're familiar with that to actually get inside of a door. A lot of doors tend not to be secure against these type of attacks. And I want to say maybe I'd say like a 60 to 65% or so success rate is typically what you're going to see out of something like this when you attack a door. And of course, you've got other tools such as lockpick, rakes. Another plug, if you guys ever heard of Sparrows, I highly recommend getting one of these guys. It's their tuxedo kit. It costs maybe about, I don't know, about 30-40 bucks or something. But it's a small set of picks that can help you get started in learning lock picking if you're interested in doing so. And I highly recommend that you do, because it's always a good skill to have if you want to get into this kind of stuff. If you're looking to, oh yeah, and also tailgating and social engineering. I know I've mentioned that a few times already. As far as badges, if you're looking to attack these, you can use something like Proxmark for badge cloning, or you can simply steal one if you find one that's unattended. But, of course, you're going to want to give it back after the test. You can also do badge reader attacks. This is something that I've never personally done, but I saw a really cool tool online called an ESP key, which is something that you can attach to the actual wiring of the badge reader and use it to intercept credentials. And you can then go back and replay those credentials and access the door. Perimeter controls, if you see a fence, hey, can you climb it? Or is there barbed wire on top? Can you find any holes in it? Windows and walls. I'm only putting this in here because it was a bullet point on my last list. Don't do this on an actual test, please. I don't think your customer is going to take too kindly of you role-playing as the Kool-Aid man or breaking through a window. Lastly, the security professional and staff. A lot of people tell me that social engineering is a really scary thing because nobody likes to talk to people. I totally understand that to an extent. But really, social engineering can be a lot easier than you think it is, provided you approach it with the right attitude and the right mindset. Let's see. And also another thing that's often underlooked, but it's equally important, is being able to blend in. When you're on site, you're going to want to make sure that you're dressed like the people there, which again really comes back to how important reconnaissance is. If you're going to a construction yard to do a pen test there, you're not going to want to show up in a three-piece suit, right? Like, you're going to draw attention to yourself at that point. Same thing as if you're in a, I don't know, like a cafe or something, or, a smaller place that, they're testing, you're being asked to test and everyone's in street clothes. Consider not showing up in a high-vis vest, The other thing is to really act the part. It's easy to get nervous when you're on site for the first time, but the thing is like simply acting the part, walking with confidence and trying to have fun can actually really help you blend in. People who are already there are there for a reason, and you are too, and that's, to have a good test. So you're going to want to walk around with confidence, but you're also going to want to do things to help people not confront you. One of those things is doing something like talking on a phone. People do not like to interrupt others when they're on the phone. So that's a really good way to kind of walk around and, be fairly inconspicuous. Another good thing is people like to help each other also. So one of my favorite things is to always get like a big box filled up with a bunch of crap like spare keyboards or computer parts or whatever, and then drop it right by the door and make a total fool out of myself. And it's oftentimes someone will offer to help me and pick stuff up, or they might even hold the door for me and just let me into the building. It's actually pretty funny. So again, I also thought it'd be good for me to include a slide here about some easy wins to look for when you are on an engagement. You're going to want to look for things like unattended documents in conference rooms and open offices. Conference rooms tend to have their doors open. I don't think I've ever worked anywhere before where conference rooms had any sort of security or external hardening. Post-it notes and signage, that's a huge one. You've got guest Wi-Fi signs. You've got phone numbers. What else do you got? You got people who put their password on Post-it notes and pin them up on their computer. Exposed network jacks, like I was talking about earlier, those are always worth checking out. Dumpster diving opportunities, and like CJ said, it's a dirty job, but really someone's got to do it, and that someone should be you. You never know what you're going to find in there. Shoulder surfing opportunities. This is another really good one. And it's one that I've seen a lot of, like, I've had a lot of good ones with in the past. For example, if you're checking in at a front security desk and they've got one of those circular desks, you might want to position yourself at that desk so you're able to see the officer's computer screen while they're entering information. Tailgating opportunities, that's just like what we talked about earlier. You're going to want to look for people outside smoking. You're going to want to try and follow people into the building because, again, people don't like confrontation. Another easy one, though I haven't seen this one too often, worn down keypad buttons. So if you're at one of those buildings that, has a little, like 12 or so digit, pad outside where you push buttons and get let in, look to see if any of those are worn down. I think you can also buy, and I've never tried this stuff, but I've heard it mentioned that there's powder you can buy also that might help you uncover fingerprints. And also you're going to want to look for advantageous terrain and physical security flaws. That can include things like broken fencing, propped or broken doors, or you might even just find a ladder in an alley somewhere. Might be worth seeing what you could reach with that. So we are approaching the tail end of this, so I did want to walk us through a really quick case study about emulating the adversary and pen testing ABC company. So again, our first up, we're going to want to start with that recon. We're going to want to look at Google, social media, whatever we can, and really try and start building a profile of the place we're going to test. And that includes things like, employee names, job titles, phone numbers, email, all that stuff is great. You're going to want to look for important corporate phone numbers. Again, like maybe for their security office, if you feel like, going in that way, their help desk, etc. Another thing I would do is, I would actually drive to the location, like I said earlier, take some notes, classic clipboard ruse, maybe pull on a few doors if you see any that, aren't heavily attended, make sure the doors are working and see if you can get in that way. And you're really going to want to weaponize the information that you see. It's like in this case, if I was pen testing ABC company, I might observe, hey, this place uses contract guards, but they're only patrolling once an hour and they seem to do it on the hour. That would be good information to have because that might allow me to go and attack a door between that officer's patrol rounds. Similarly, if I'm parked outside my car, I'm sitting on a bench somewhere, reading a book, and I'm looking at people going in and out of the building. If I see that tailgating is very prevalent at the company and that the employees just freely let people in, there's no reason why they wouldn't let me in either, right? Same thing, if I see people smoking outside, that might be a really good way for me to meet and befriend someone. I could go and stand in that smokers area. I could talk to those people. And then after making friends with them, I could just follow them inside, no questions asked, ideally. So once I have this information and I really see what my options are, I could go about this in a few different ways. I could call the location from a spoof number and begin social engineering attacks based on observed signage. Or I could do the little boxers that I talked about earlier, where I bring a huge box and one of those employees lets me in and holds the door for me. Or I could sit in that smoking area and maybe grab someone with a badge cloner, So provided we've done these things, there's a bunch of different outcomes, and provided we played our cards right and we, acted with confidence, we can expect to obtain our loot. So we might call that help desk and they might be able to give us access to accounts with the information that we gathered. Or we might be let in, via tailgating. And from there, we might be able to locate an unattended computer or perhaps an insecure conference room with, confidential information. Or say I'm outside and I'm able to clone that badge, suddenly I've gained elevated privileges and I can now walk around inside of that building, with those stolen credentials. We are getting very close to the end of this, but I did want to share a few social engineering ideas with you. This was kind of an afterthought to this whole thing, but again, I've had a few requests for SE ideas, so I'm going to share a few quick scripts with everyone here. The three things that I really like to go after when I social engineer someone are urgency, fear, and excitement. Those are things that really tend to get people wound up. So first, we have a ruse up here, which kind of targets that whole fear aspect. I could say something like, Hi, this is John Smith. I'm the general manager of the downtown ABC security branch. We're calling to inform you that your boss has been terminated effective immediately and we no longer have access to their payroll system. To ensure that you are paid in a timely manner, I need to get some personal information from you for security purposes. Can I please have the last 4 digits of your social security number? Then they would either give it to me or they would call me out. And then I could continue pressing with questions like that. Those questions and the ones you would want to ask, that would again come from making sure that you've done your recon and doing something like scouting out their IT service desk. So that way, after you get this person's information, you could call the IT help desk and hijack their account. Another good one that I've had a great amount of success with is saying something like, hi, this is John Smith with ABC Company, Department of Human Resources. We have a really pressing matter that we need to discuss with you. But before we proceed with this phone call, we do need you to provide us with some information to confirm your identity. That's another really good one because people hear that HR has just called them about a very pressing matter. Of course, you know it's BS, but the other person on the end of the line doesn't do that. All they know is that HR has just called them and shit has hit the fan. So they're going to be pressured into giving you that information. Another good one is to call somebody, pose as a member of corporate and say something like, hi, this is John Smith, General Operations Manager of ABC Company's downtown Chicago branch. We sent out an email to you earlier today about an employee recognition program, but you didn't give us a reply. I don't know if that's gone in your spam folder or anything, but we've decided that we're actually going to be paying out pretty sizable bonuses to our team this year. However, we do want to make sure that, you are who, we think you are. So we do need you to confirm some information real quick, just so we can safely disclose the amount that you're going to be receiving. That tends to get people a lot too. And again, feel free to use the information that you gather and adjust accordingly. People might call you out. They might get suspicious and, hey, more power to those people, right? But there's also really good ways to deflect and to kind of douse those suspicions. Let's talk a little bit about that real quick. So if you're going to be calling in somewhere, you're going to want to build a convincing cover for yourself. And again, that's really taking on that perceived spot of authority. You want people to think that you're in charge, and you want to give them reasons to either respect or fear you, or to be excited by what you got to tell them. And again, about easing suspicions, like that's a super important step. And it's something that you want to make sure you do, because you might get information from somebody, but if you don't ease their suspicions, they might go and talk to a coworker and be like, hey, Steve, some guy just called me and he asked me for the last 4 of my social security number and he said he's with HR. Did you get this call? And Steve might go, oh yeah, no, I didn't. Are you sure it was HR? And then suddenly you've got a problem. But if you end a phone call with something like, hey, so thanks so much for your time. Tell you what we're gonna do. I'm gonna send you, and I'm currently out of the office right now, but I'm gonna send you a calendar invite later this evening for us to have a follow-up meeting. That might help, because in that case, those people are now going to be expecting a calendar invite for you. It sounds like something you would hear in a workplace setting, right? And of course, if that does ease their suspicions, they're going to be less likely to talk to people, which means you're going to be undercover for a lot longer, and you're going to have more time to operate with those stolen credentials. And then again, hey, if you're in person, talk on your phone and appear busy. People like to avoid conflict. Put yourself in a position of distress. People will try and help you. I don't know. I always like to spill stuff, at the entryway of a building just for added theater. People tend to help me pick it up and help me with the door. And again, just let people let you in. It's really not that hard. You could fumble with a blank badge that you have that you pasted a picture on in Photoshop, and people will often be so busy, they'll just walk in ahead of you and then you can just follow them.
Have your hands full, carry a pizza.
Yeah, carry a pizza. I wouldn't throw it on the ground though. That'd be a terribly sad waste.
Oh.
So that's really it.
I got some questions. Yes.
All right. Let's hear them.
We have some questions and comments. Actually, Tobu and I were talking a little bit. He's talking about, I think he's in Norway. He's talking about how woeful their physical security locks are. But I was over there and we were talking about physical, that Norwegians are pretty polite and orderly. And someone else chimed in about being a foreigner in Japan, you can get away with a lot. So with the international following, there's a culture, right? There's culture to countries and there's culture to businesses. And that's part of your recon. And you're outside of the box thinking about how to exploit those types of things. And then from Q&A, says, I'm not familiar with the business side of pen testing, but are physical pen tests something that you would discuss with every or most clients?
Yeah, you would have to. I mean, one thing that so when you cover, engagement expectations and you get the deal in the ground, maybe, I hope this answers the question to some extent, but you need to take that permission with you. The last thing you want is for an on-site officer to bust you and call the cops on you and then have to try and explain your way out of things with no sort of proof whatsoever. So really having that conversation, documenting it, and getting expressed written permission and keeping it on your person is an absolute must. It could literally be the difference between you spending your night at home in bed or in a jail cell somewhere.
Yeah, that's part of your ROE. You should have a get out of jail letter. And we talked earlier about someone saying having a fake one, which is great to present a fake one to see if they validate it. Is the person who signed it actually someone in the chain of custody? Because it's kind of like a last ditch effort to squeeze a little value out. But then having a real one and having that person, your get out of jail person, your authority person, up and available when you're talking. So I think that part of the question though was about basically, do you sell or do you push this? And I'm wearing the proudly sucking at capitalism. We do not push physicals on customers. Customers, we generally let them ask. They know their needs, and it's not super common. Physical isn't even, I don't know how many physicals we do a year, Brian. I mean, 10,
5, 6, yeah, less than 10.
Yeah, not one every month.
Yeah.
When we do, they tend to be interesting places. Like we did a big mining. I remember David went to a mining place. We did hotels. We've done hospitals, and that's interesting. And we've done aerospace places where we actually broke in by climbing up onto the roof. We had to expense a ladder from Home Depot. But there's a follow-up to that question, John. How important do you think physical testing is compared to the more technical aspects? And how can we as security professionals ensure that clients are also taking physical controls as serious as the technical ones?
Honestly, I think physical security is going to become more important over time, really. Because, you can't give people a software patch that just helps them discover, malicious payloads. You know what I mean?
So then I got to follow up on that one. So then so let me ask you this. So if a company comes to us and they say, I want a physical this year at my headquarters. Okay, so we come and we do the physical pen test and we give them a good report, so on and so forth. They get some good recommendations. How often do you recommend doing a physical pen test to stay up to date? Is that something you think you need to do annually, or is it like, hey, every other year, or what's your opinion on the cadence of physical testing?
Me personally, as often as it's preferred. And that's just me speaking as a past security manager. I trained a lot of my guards in doing basic pen tests of our site every patrol. So that would include things like door checks, looking at the condition of doors, checking our keypads for sign of wear, looking at the position of cameras, all that stuff. And it's something that we got a lot of value out of,
Brian, I think that's the classic risk question of it depends. You have to do a risk analysis. And what's best? Continuous pen testing, right? Continuous pen testing is the best. Always be checking, surprise. And I think John's right. You can actually train some of your guards to come pull some stunts and techniques on your crew, or you can do it as the manager yourself once in a while.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I ask questions that I know the ansers to, but I kind of want to have,
it creates
652.
You just ruined the bit, Brian.
But I actually do kind of have a little bit of a something I was hoping you guys would throw on there, but I wanted to throw on, if you didn't, is I think a lot of this comes down to whenever we're doing any type of testing, people ask, well, how often? We don't have any compliance, we don't have any requirements on things. How often should we do this type of testing? Well, I think sometimes it comes down to like the quality of I guess what are the findings that you get on the report, right? If we come in there and it's like we tailgate, it's like hot knife through butter, right? Like the security people aren't even there. Yeah, I would probably say coming back next year is not a bad idea. But if we show up and it's locked down and it's difficult and it's hard and things like that, and you're in an area that you're not too highly concerned, it also depends about where you're at geographically. Are you in a skyscraper with 50 other people? There's a lot of factors that go into it. But that's kind of one thing I would say, like, having that internal conversation around, hey, we did really well. And we're in a pretty secure location and we're feeling really confident about this. We're on the outskirts of town. We know people. Let's not worry about it too much versus we didn't do too hot and we're in a skyscraper and there's 50,000 people that come in and out of this building every single day. Nobody knows everybody. This is something we should do every single time, like every single year. So I just kind of want to just further elaborate on the answers that CJ and John gave there.
Another aspect to that is about like, how does this work? You've got to have physical controls. Cyber doesn't stand in a box. And we all know if you get physical access to the server rack, it's game over. Well, that's not completely true, but it's important, but you've got to have policy and requirements and controls that you're tracking and working and considering. It's part of your risk analysis.
Actually,
part of your threat.
My first experience with anything security related at all was John bringing me along on a physical pen test that he was doing. I've never even told this story, but yeah, he literally parked somewhere and he's like, call this number if the police show up. And I was like, what? And I thought it was all joking. And I thought he was being so overly like dramatic about the whole thing. And, coal fire happened. So there's a level of truth to it, but yeah, it's just, fun story.
Someone asked a question about how useful is it gaining access to a neighboring building, business, and eavesdropping on Wi-Fi views through Windows, et cetera. I'm like, Be careful with that. When you say access, always permission. And you should really work through some of those scenarios with your customer about, hey, do you want us to try to like look through, get on the roof of the building across the street legally and take camera pictures of your boss trying to type his password into the keyboard or whatever you're talking about doing. I know that when we do skyscrapers and wirelesses, you're always trying to sniff the wireless from the floor below. Is it shielded? How easy? How many floors can you get through? How are the doors? Can you just go up the stairwell and wait for someone to come out and dash through the exit doors? So good stuff. Another question is out there about, as a company, how hard do you think it is to transition from doing cybersecurity assessments into doing physical security assessments? John?
So I think there definitely could be a bit of a knowledge gap there. And it's especially true of people like, like myself who are self-taught, hackers, people who grew up on a command line, DOS, and people who took classes on cybersecurity, all that sort of stuff. Like when you're in school learning about cybersecurity, you are not going to have a teacher who goes into the back room and pulls out an underdoor tool and say, hey, this is an underdoor tool. Here's how you use it. Or, hey, this is a snake rake. Here's the type of lock you would want to use it on. You're just not going to have that area of knowledge unless you've taken the time to really go after that sort of thing yourself, at least in my experience. So as far as how that relates to transitioning over and doing actual physicals, I think it means that, if you have a team of people and you're going to start physicals, you need to make sure those people are well-versed in the tools, because otherwise you could give someone those tools, but they're not going to know how to use them. And then your client's not going to get the results that they need.
Yeah.
I
said the same thing on social engineering. Sometimes the personalities we have are not. So you're talking about playing the role and like I said, it's performance art. You kind of got to look for people who will specialize a little bit in that, or gravitate to it, and then train them up and do that. And then someone asked the converse, let's flip that. How hard is it going from physical assessments to cyber? I'm like,
that's a good question for John.
Yes, all right. So I've always loved technology, right? And I've been doing the hacky thing since I was 14 years old. Quick funny story. People ask me my first cybersecurity certification. I tell them it was my suspension papers from high school after I installed Diablo 2 and StarCraft on all of the machines through a back door. That was my first cert.
I want that on your resume now. I want to see that on your LinkedIn.
That's awesome, John. That is a classic story.
I think I have it somewhere. Yeah, here it is.
Oh, no joke. Oh my gosh.
It should
Right
be
here.
There it is, framed. I love
Framed.
that. Oh, bravo.
Yep.
Bravo.
Oh, wow. That's
So,
pretty cool.
but as far as making that transition goes, though, like one of the things that really, I guess, made it challenging for me, and it was challenging, is that I took a break from cyber stuff for a long time, right? Because like when I was first into this, the internet was the Wild West. We had the Yahoo chat rooms, we had the AIM instant messaging services. And I'm a kid learning, how to do buffer overflows on that sort of stuff. And it's like so much has changed since then. Now we've got these Active Directory environments and domain controllers and all this new stuff. So really, it was a tough transition. I had to really buckle down for about 2 years, read a lot of books, go on informational websites like Try Hack Me and Hack the Box, do CTFs, and really put the time in to learn. It was not easy.
Yeah, it's a commitment. I remember because I was a junior sysadmin and I came at it from no computer security or computer background at all. And you've really got to work hard. And that's why training's good. But hey, we're less than 4 minutes left. Deb, do you want me to turn it back over to you to wrap up?
You're doing a fantastic job. I don't think you need me.
Oh my God, Deb. She must have taken the hat off. No, it's still on.
Well, once you put a hat on, you wear it the rest of the day. If you're a lady, it just smashes your hair. And anyway,
Yeah, you think it's different for guys. Okay.
if you're bald.
Hey, I thought this was a great presentation, John, and you were worried that you weren't going to have enough material. You're going to be done in 15 minutes. Surprise.
Yeah, here we are. Wow.
Crowd was very engaged. Good questions. Thank you all so much for attending.
I think it was better than Deviants from 6 years ago, 7 years ago.
It's different.
I don't know about that.
It's just different.
Oh, it's so much better. So much
just
better.
different.
Just different.
It's
Deb,
different,
the diplomat.
Not better. They're both fantastic. Yes, it was great. We have 3 minutes. Any other questions you can shoot out that we didn't answer? Please post them in the webcast live chat channel, and we will try to answer them or make up something.
Yeah, I'll be hanging out there for a while, keeping an eye on stuff. So feel free to ping me.
People giving you props for sure.
Yeah, you're an absolute boss.
Yes, the recording will be posted.
You're the boss.
The recording is posted. The slides are posted as always. Someone will post the links in there to show you guys where.
I just think we should have a rolling ticker at the bottom of everybody's screen. Yes, the recordings will be posted within the next 2 weeks.
It's a good reason for the support crew to just paste it in again.
Yeah.
It's my literal one job, Brian. So don't take that away.
I can automate that. I think we can get ChatGPT to do something like
to
that.
automate Deb's job.
Yeah.
Well, maybe. I'd like to see you try.
I'd like to see ChatGPT wear a hat.
Great. That's all I'm here for is wearing hats.
We got another one.
Hey, quick interjection here. Don't ever do that crap that I did where you do something like that without permission, okay?
Oh,
I got suspended for that, and that's just something I feel I've just got to add.
That's what we were applauding, John.
There are no children watching. What are you talking about? Do it, people. Do it. Teach your kids to do it. Go.
Yeah, this is a family-friendly show.
Look, be very careful with the legal end of this and the force. Someone was talking about resistance and, can you break windows? It's like, depending on what the employer authorizes, but you never want to resist when the guards are armed. Like, that's a bad idea.
Yeah.
Safety is the number one concern.
Well, and that's what's going to be my thing is I heard somebody, I think it was you, CJ, say have a fake get out of jail free card, see if they take that.
Yeah.
But that scares me because it's and if they catch me, I'm like, oh, I'm just kidding. Here's the real one. They're like,
no, but
I'm
that was a great technique, Brian, because sometimes you hand people a letter. There was a guy talking about it that he was doing a physical. And he told the lawyer, and then the guard let him take selfies and have the run of the place. I'm like, well, if the guard knew you're busted and then showed you, that's one thing. But if the guard didn't verify that you're doing a pen test, what keeps somebody off the street from saying, I'm just doing a pen test?
Yeah.
It's an onion, right? There's layers to that, and you make sure they check the layers. I've heard that classic story before of presenting a fake. fake authorization letter.
Yeah.
Signed by, Rumpelstiltskin or Ronald Reagan or some stupid thing. And then the guard's like, okay, well, go ahead in.
I love that those were your two that you went with. Rumpelstiltskin and Ronald Reagan.
They both start with R. It was alliteration, Deb. Leave me alone.
I said I liked
Hey,
it.
Deb, close us out.
Sarcastic.
We hit the mark, Deb.
All right. Well, it is 2:00. Thank you guys for joining us for Black Hills Information Security webcast. What do we say at the end? If you need a red team pen test, whatever.
Training.
You know what we do and where to find us. We don't know how to do marketing. So, thank you for joining us. And yeah, if you want to stay around and chat with us, we'll be here probably hanging out for the next 15 minutes. So
We're going to keep hanging out?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ryan,
Part of the show.
John, stop sharing your screen. I've been posting I've been messaging you on Teams and it's showing up. It's like, hi, Discord. You're good.
Love you. See you. Bye.
Love you. See you. Bye. Did you find the picture of John Strand in high school?
I got it's a physical picture somewhere.
Sure. It's not framed like John's. Like
I don't have, like, as you can tell, I have lots of framed pictures of my loved ones around me at all times. Just to encourage me to keep going.
You do. You look like a single guy in college. Is the vibe you give off there.
I feel like I'm a single guy in college. My wife has all the kids out of the house.
Why are you here? I'd be napping or something.
I don't know.
I'm
if I
glad
make a
you're
presence now and I leave and I don't do anything the rest of the day, I at least could say I was working.
I was working it. Yeah. There's proof of it.
So
good crowd. I like the chatter today.
I know. It's good. I like the format. I like CJ when you come in and ask a question and it's live. It's easier to not miss things when you do that. So well done.
I try to mix it up because there's a thing that says that one person talking just gets monotonous and people tune out. And so it's really good to have sort of breaks and stops and to shift people's attention and then go back.
I guess we can ask John if he liked it being interrupted.
Yeah, was it good? Was it natural enough, John?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay. Good.
I tried to pick opportune moments, like when you finish a slide, or when the question was really pertinent to what was going on the slide. That's tough.
There was a question someone asked and I missed it, but he kind of asked about what about companies that are almost 100% work from home, how this would apply to. Well,
it's hard to get permission you'd have to get your employees ahead, say, okay, can we try to break into your houses?
I guess. Yeah, that just sounds not right.
It seems very dangerous, right?
Yeah.
To my house and a lot of people at Black Hills Information Security.
Yeah. Yes. So.
See the sword? The sword is the least of my weaponry in this room back there.
Yeah, these license plates are very sharp.
They could cut you. Yeah.
Cut myself on them. So I think
best weapon in CJ's office is his chessboard.
Hey, my mind is a honed weapon.
Well, if no one else has any questions, I think we can call it.
There's the home defense system, RZA. Yes, every 40 phase plasma rifle on the 40 gigawatt range.
That's awesome. All right, I think we're done. Ryan, do you want to kill it? Kill it, fire? Kill it.
Grumpy Cat says no.
Kill it with Ryan, fire.
Well, ignore Grumpy Cat. Press on, Ryan.
Press on, Ryan. Whatever.
The shootist.
Is he even here? Is he even here right now? Is he gone?